On September 7, 1977, President Jimmy Carter and Panamanian leader Omar Torrijos signed the Panama Canal Treaty. This treaty stopped the United States' control of the canal beginning in 2000 and guaranteed the neutrality of the waterway. Overall, the treaty was used as a rationale for the 1989 United States invasion of Panama, which saw the overthrow of Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega. The 1973 oil crisis began in October of 1973 when the members of the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries proclaimed an oil embargo. It was targeted at nations perceived as supporting Israel during the Yom Kippur War. By the end of it, in March of 1974, the price of oil had risen nearly 400%, from $3 a barrel to nearly $12 worldwide. On August 4th of 1977, President Jimmy Carter signed the Department of Energy Organization Act of 1977 into law, which created the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy was created to govern policies regarding the nation's nuclear weapons program, naval reactor production, energy-related supervision, and domestic energy production. The Department of Energy is responsible for advancing the national, economic, and energy security of the United States through the implementation of policies regarding nuclear power, fossil fuels, and alternative energy sources. The Camp David Accords were a series of agreements signed by the Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. Following nearly 2 weeks of top-secret negotiations at Camp David, the historic country retreat of the President of the United States. President Carter brought the two sides together, and the accords were signed on September 17, 1978. The landmark agreement stabilized the fractious relations between Israel and Egypt. During a summit meeting in Vienna, President Jimmy Carter and Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev signed the SALT II agreement dealing with limitations and guidelines for nuclear weapons. The treaty, which never formally went into effect, proved to be one of the most controversial U.S.-Soviet agreements of the Cold War. The Olympic boycott of 1980. In 1980, the United States led a boycott of the Summer Olympic Games in Moscow to protest the late 1979 Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In total, 65 nations refused to participate in the Games. The announcement came after the Soviet Union failed to comply with Carter's February 20th, 1980 deadline to withdraw its troops from Afghanistan. This worsened relations between the United States and Russia. I decided to give President Carter a C+ on his domestic policies due to multiple actions that caused uneasiness and debate over his decisions. For example, Carter's decision to give up the control of the Panama Canal caused debates within Congress and the public of the United States. Also, many Americans were unhappy with President Carter's response to the oil crisis that struck in 1973. Many Americans found Carter's response as late and not enough. Despite these negative reasons, President Carter signed the Department of Energy into law, which helped the United States keep balance on many issues with a special group. The main reason why I gave President Carter a C+ was due to his decisions that caused a divide between many Americans. I decided to give President Carter a B+ on his foreign policy due to the progression that he made, which helped the best interests of the country. For example, he used the Panama Canal Treaty as a rationale for the 1989 U.S. invasion of Panama, which saw the overthrow of a Panamanian dictator, Manuel Noriega. This helped stabilize the United States' relations with Panama despite losing the canal. President Carter also stepped in between the war that Israel and Egypt were having and brought peace between the two. He brought the two leaders from each country and helped them come to an agreement to stop the fighting. President Carter also met Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev at a summit meeting in Vienna, where they signed the SALT II agreement dealing with limitations and guidelines for nuclear weapons. Although the agreement never went into place, it eased tension between the two. Although the United States seemed to be in a better path as the Soviet Union, once the Soviets invaded Afghanistan in late 1979, the United States and 65 other countries refused to send athletes to compete, which worsens the relations between the two global powerhouses. The main reason why I gave President Carter a B+ was due to his ideas and decisions that ultimately brought more good than bad.